How does technology affect the way that we learn? How do the interactions shape us and our education? In this video essay, I will attempt to answer these questions. Controversy about the impact of technology on cognition dates back to Plato's criticism of writing. Plato argued that writing decreased the amount of things that people could actually remember as they could write things down effectively. This citation comes from Vedechkina and Borgonovi, 2021. They note that it is ironic that Plato held these views and that we only know about them through his students such as Socrates writing those down. I think that this is another instance of all philosophy is just footnotes on Plato because he clearly invented tech criticism. The focus of this video is not ancient philosophy. Rather, we are historically contextualizing our relationship to technologies. And as we can see with the Plato example, there has been controversy about this relationship since the invention of writing. Other authors, such as Dhawan 2020, trace the origin of education technology to the 12th century in India with the use of writing slates. The author then cites the printing press in the 1440s, the abacus in the 1600s, and the early 1900s with the invention of film as further progressions in the history of education technology. Historian David Noble traces the origin of distance learning to the 1800s, where the lessons were mediated by the United States Postal Service and not computers. Then, in the 1900s, with the invention of film and radio, distance education changed. In 1913, Thomas Edison prefigured open online courses when he said that film could replace teachers. The first digital computer was Mark I, which was located at Harvard. It was originally used for military calculations. The Navy used it to design torpedoes and underwater detection systems. It was also used for some calculations in the Manhattan Project. ENIAC, or ENIAC, was the second computer at the University of Pennsylvania in 1946. ENIAC was originally used to calculate artillery firing tables. It could perform approximately 50,000 instructions per second. An iPhone in 2014 could handle nearly 5 billion instructions per second. These early computers operated on punch cards, so it was a very different programming interface than like anything that we experience today. Students had to reserve computer time to run their programs and would prepare them in advance. It was not until the 1970s and 1980s when microcomputers would become widespread enough to enable distance education via the computer. According to Morrill in 1997, this happened rather quickly. In 1963, only 1% of U.S. secondary schools had access to computers for instruction. By 1975, 55% of schools had access to computers, and 23% of them were using them for primary instruction. A microcomputer is more analogous to what we have today, although significantly less powerful than the devices to which most Americans have access in the 2020s. Zawacki-Richter and Latchem 2018 breaks down the history of the computer and its effects on education into 4 time series. The first is the advancement and growth of computer-based instruction, which is 1976 to 1986. The second is standalone multimedia learning, 1987 to 1996. The third is networked computers as tools for collaborative learning, 1997 to 2006. And finally, online learning in the digital age, 2007 to 2016. The study was conducted by feeding 40 years of the Computers in Education journal articles into a program called Leximancer, which then helped the researchers build concept maps and periodize their findings. This is interesting to note because this type of data mining research would not be possible without the digital computer. So as we can see, the computer affects not only education, but the way we research education. And computers may be used to quote-unquote read huge sections of data that it would not be possible for any human to actually read in a reasonable amount of time. In different eras, the computational technologies allow different forms of education. It begins with computers assisting instruction, evolves into computers as standalone instructors, into network computers as a collaborative learning process, and finally, the types of learning in the quote digital age. We are still in the digital age, but we may also add a fifth period to this analysis, which would be the Pandemic effect on education technologies. The pandemic forced schools to reconceptualize how they deliver educational services and rapidly integrated computational technologies into their instructional methods. Now we will revisit Vedechkina and Borgonovi 2021, which is a meta-analysis of the effects of technology on cognition and attention in children and young people. One study discussed in this meta-analysis related specifically to academia and examined the issue of media multitasking. This was negatively associated with academic performance. One explanation is that multitasking on media leads one to spend less time on academic work. It is also possible that media multitasking limits the attention available for the processing of the academic content. The authors cite Bowman et al. 2010, which studied the effect of instant messaging on reading. The authors found it took students longer to read a text if they were IMing while reading, but it did not affect their overall comprehension of the text. Multitasking may decrease efficiency in academia, but it does not necessarily affect accuracy. These results are from a cross-sectional study and should be taken with a grain of salt, however, because the authors cite a longitudinal analysis which does not find an association between multitasking and academic achievement. Quote, taken together, the weight of evidence does not conclusively demonstrate that digital multitasking impairs attention and cognitive control in a global or persistent manner. The authors find that there is, quote, little support for negative long-term correlations with digital technologies and cognitive deficits in children. They do say, however, that the longer one engages with digital technologies, the greater propensity for the effects, both good and bad, from using the technologies. Also, quote, parents and education professionals can encourage children to adjust the pace of content they are exposed to, empowering them to maximize the cognitive benefits of modern technologies and reduce some of the potential pitfalls associated with their uncritical use. This is obviously important as education becomes increasingly delivered via computers, and computers play a larger role in educational services generally. It behooves us to understand the benefits and disadvantages of technology usage. People in our technology are in what Catherine Hayles would call a technogenetic spiral as we evolve together. Our successes may be enhanced by a good critical understanding of the technologies we use, their effects, and our relationship with the tech in question. With that, I would like to thank you for watching the whirlwind tour of my honors seminar project. You can read the full paper, which includes a section about what constitutes good tech criticism. Perhaps I will make that into a separate video. Regardless, I hope that you learned something and you think more critically about the world after having watched this. Peace.